Hey team, welcome to Colbyashi Maru, the show where devs all over the world boldly face off against the most logical tools on the web. I'm Colby Fayok, your Space Jelly commander and host of today's challenge. Today we have Sam Julien. Sam is a developer relations manager at Auth0. He is also a prolific writer and an egghead instructor where he just launched an awesome new course that walks you step by step through what we're actually working through today, deploying Ghost to AWS. So let's bring him in. Hey, Sam, do you want to give yourself a quick intro, or is there anything else that you'd like to add yourself?
I'm muted. Rule number one of streaming. So yeah, I am Sam Julien. I manage the developer relations team at Auth0. We're an access and identity management platform. And on the side, I do a few different things. I've written a couple books. I have a book called Getting Started in Developer Relations and another book called Guide to Tiny Experiments, which is a framework for finishing what you start. And then I send a weekly newsletter called Developer Microskills. That's all about improving as a developer and developer advocate. And then I also make video courses, and one of which, what that just came out, is on Egghead. That's all about deploying Ghost to AWS. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Well, if you're new to Colbyashi Maru, our guest will have 1 hour to complete their project. Through that time, Sam will talk out loud as he's working through the challenge. I'll also be asking questions along the way, but if you have a question, make sure you don't hesitate and ask over in the chat, and I'll get them over to Sam. So today, Sam, again, will be facing off against deploying Ghost to AWS with EC2 and RDS, all those acronyms. I feel like I was stumbling there, but I think we're good. But if Sam doesn't finish the challenge, all is not lost. We'll see if we have enough time to finish up, or we'll just kind of chat about what next steps would be. So Sam, before we actually dive into the project, do you want to just give a quick little about what the tools you're going to be using and an idea of before we dive in?
Yeah, sure.
So I can pull up your screen now too.
Say that again.
And I pulled up your screen now too, so if you want to show anything.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah. So the inspiration for this was I'm currently doing a bunch of learning on AWS, and I found that there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of acronyms and jargon and things like that. So I have been compiling resources together and trying to learn a bunch of different concepts and things like that. And I wanted to just kind of do a project for myself to try to learn a bunch of these different skills, which was to try to deploy the blogging platform Ghost to AWS. I had seen like another tutorial talk about using WordPress, and I kind of wanted to go the more like open source route and just kind of check that out. If you use something like DigitalOcean, then you know that there's often like one-click deployment solutions for things like Ghost. And so what I wanted to try to learn how to do was do this kind of the hard way, to learn some networking and some AWS concepts and things like that. And so I had tweeted about this, and Joel from Egghead was like, why don't you turn that into an Egghead course? And so we did. And so that's where this came from, where we kind of like step by step go through it. And so in the stream today, I'm going to try to get through what I can. Sometimes AWS is finicky and there's a lot of moving parts and things like that. So if things go awry at any point, I can always show the completed stuff. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Awesome. Well, if you're ready, I think I'm ready, and we can get the timer started. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right. I started the timer.
Cool. So the first thing I just want to show is some of the networking setup. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I found that if things start to go wrong, it's usually because there's some sort of networking error. And so for these kinds of things, you need to have the default virtual private cloud set up And I'm using a demo account, so I'm not going to try too hard to like obscure things because I can always just obliterate everything in here. But when you're setting up these like servers and databases and things like that, they have to have these places that they live on the internet. And so there's something called a virtual private cloud that the project is going to actually live in. And luckily, AWS already like sets up a default one of these for you. But it's composed of a bunch of different pieces. Like, so a VPC or a virtual private cloud is like a regional resource, and the default in the US is the Ohio region, and that's okay with us. You also need to have a couple of subnets set up. So again, these will be defaulted for you in AWS, and these are sort of like ranges of IP addresses in the virtual private cloud. The reason that this is important is that when we set up our database, AWS wants us to have subnets in different availability zones. Availability zones are, you can kind of think of them as like logical data centers in a region, and each one has separate power and networking and things like that, so that if one of them fails, then the other one is available. And then the other thing we need to make sure we have is an internet gateway, which is also included in the default network. And this lets our VPC talk to the internet. And now there are a couple of other pieces, and I'm just going to go ahead and skip them for now, just since it's more informational. But there's a video in the course that kind of goes in a little bit more detail about what these things are and what to do if something's messed up in your setup.
And I'll post a link to that course in the chat. I have a question though. So you said that this comes default with an AWS setup. So when somebody's just starting off, do they kind of have to think about this if they just want to just deploy something on EC2?
No, you don't have to. The reason I included it was I had found that I had been doing so many different tutorials about different things that my setup had gotten all messed up because I had like deleted things, or and I didn't know what I was doing, and so it was like, and so I was getting all these crazy errors, and I didn't realize that was the issue. And so I just know that people who are learning AWS like me, it's really easy to mess things up and not realize it. And it turned out that this process was a lot easier if you just create a clean account and use a default network. And there's actually a trick you can do to restore a default network too. So,
interesting.
But yeah, if you're just getting started and you just create a new account, you shouldn't have any issues trying to do this kind of thing.
Awesome. And that's not to take, like, they're definitely super important parts of and concepts someone should eventually learn, but it's good to know that you don't have to dive in right away.
Yeah. So the first real thing that we want to do, so Ghost, actually I should pull up the little diagram. Let's see if I can pull up the Ghost docs. They have a nice little architecture diagram. Yeah, here we go. So Ghost is like it's like a blogging platform. It's sort of like WordPress, and the way it works is there's a storage layer, which is the database, and then there's a node server that runs the back end and the front end, basically. So what we need in order to make Ghost work is a server that can run node, and then a database that can store all of the information. And Ghost is fairly flexible. We're going to use all of the defaults just to make our lives easier, but you can actually switch out any of these pieces with other things. But we're just going to go with kind of the standard way that they want us to do it. So the first thing we need is a server of some kind. And for this, the part of AWS is called EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud. And basically what that means is you can create your own server from an image, and you can start it and stop it at will, and play around with it, deploy things on it. So you can see I've already got one here, but we'll go ahead and walk through the process of creating one for fun. So what we can do is let's go back to the dashboard, and let's click launch instance. And so we have all these options of the different machine images. That's basically the template that has all of the configuration of the operating system, the server, anything like that. And there's a bunch of them. You can even see there's like one for Mac OS Big Sur, all that kind of stuff. We are going to use Ubuntu to run this. And I think we're okay to use version 20. Let's see. Let's use 18 just because that's what I used in the course, and I don't want to inadvertently run into a versioning issue. We're probably okay to use 20, but I'm going to select Ubuntu 18. One thing that's really important here is you want to pick these ones that are free tier eligible. AWS has kind of, there's stuff that's always free, and then there's stuff that's free for the first year, basically. So always be looking for things like this so that you don't inadvertently charge yourself a bunch of money. So I can select that.
Yeah, and while, you know, AWS forces you to add your credit card, like as opposed to some of the other services, it does have a really nice free tier where you can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend, even if you maybe have had like an account in the past or something, just create a new account for doing tutorials and stuff that you can start the clock on the free year, because you'll get a bunch of hours of like free hours of use and things like that expire after the first year. So it's really good for learning. So the second screen here is the instance type, and the instance type is kind of like different types of servers. There are different machines for different purposes. So, you know, the kind of thing you're going to use for a web server is a different machine than you would use to do a bunch of like high capacity computing where you're crunching a bunch of numbers and running machine learning and stuff like that. So again, we're going to use a free tier eligible one. This is called T2 Micro, and that's just the default. So you can just leave that. We really are doing mostly defaults here, but I'm going to go ahead and walk through to the next setup here. And so we can configure the defaults. The networking stuff that I mentioned is here. We've only got the one setup here, so we don't really have to worry too much about that. There are a lot of different options here. We're going to leave all of those as they are because we don't really need any of these options, but you can kind of poke around and read through these things to see what other things you can do with your server. You can also add storage to it if you want. We're just going to keep it simple. We don't need much storage just to run Ghost. So we're gonna, you can see you get up to 30 gigabytes of storage on the free tier. So I'm just gonna leave that. And then you can also add tags. I highly recommend adding a tag to these things because they're really hard to remember. So I'm gonna add a name tag and just call this Colby server so I don't forget. And then the next thing is a security group. So this is sort of like a collection of resources that all have access to the same things. So I'm going to create a new server, a new security group for this. I'm going to call it Colby group so that we can remember that. Because basically we want to tell AWS where things are allowed to access the database and where they're able to access the rest of the internet and things like that. And so while we do that, we need to add a couple of things in here in these, basically these permissions. So one thing we want to be able to do is SSH into the server. And so you can see SSH, that's port 22. And right now, this 0.0.0, that means everybody. That means the entire internet could SSH, and we don't want that. So we're going to change this, and AWS has this option for my IP that you can put in, and it'll autofill with that one, which is really nice. So now only I'll be able to SSH into the server. The other thing we want is to add HTTP, because we're going to want to be able to put this guy on the internet. So HTTP is port 80, and we do want everybody to be able to access port 80 on on the internet. So, and this there's two different types of IP addresses. There's IPv4 and IPv6. So this format here with the 0.0.0 is 4, and this one with the :/0 is 6, and they both mean the same thing. If we were going to connect this to a domain and do secure server, we could add HTTPS. I don't really need to do this because we're not going to do it, but I'll just do it now anyway so that we can see how that looks. And HTTPS is port 443, and we're going to let everybody access for that. Cool. So we're good on that. So we can just review and launch. You can see here that it's got all the summary of everything, and that's all we need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Now, one thing you need is a public key and a private key to be able to access this. I already have a key pair, and I think I'm just going to stick with that one since I know it's somewhere on my computer.
That makes sense.
But you can also create a new key pair and download it to your computer. But when we SSH into the server, we're going to use that to tell AWS that we are, in fact, who we say we are. Actually, before I do this, maybe I will just double check over on my other screen that I've got that key somewhere. So I don't do something that I'll regret. Let's see, it was called Ghost Key. Yeah, where's that guy? Yep, okay, it's in my dev folder, so we are go. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and select that and hit launch instances, and that's going to launch that. And if we go back to, we click view instances, we can actually see, and now you can see why I added that name tag, because these instance IDs are not exactly user friendly. So I want to know which ones are up and running. So you can see this one is the one we started. It's got a public address and a private address, and it is currently running.
Oh, it booted up already.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be that fast. I thought it was going to take a little bit.
Yeah, these are actually pretty quick, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So now we've got our server. So there's nothing on this server except for Ubuntu. And so we'll need to set up everything. But first, we're going to create the database, because that will take some time, and we'll let that spin up while we do the rest of everything else. So let's go. We're gonna use a service called RDS. So RDS stands for Relational Database Services. So AWS has every database option you can imagine running on the cloud. You can do SQL, you can do NoSQL. So if you do something like SQL, then you're going to use RDS for that. And if we look, you can see my database instances, and Ghost by default will use MySQL. So that's what we're going to use as well. So I can go ahead and create the database. We'll create a new one for us. And I'm going to do standard create, and we're going to use MySQL. And we can just use the latest or whatever the default version here, just for our purposes. You can always check. The good thing to do is check with Ghost in their docs to see if there's like specific version requirements and things like that. Because sometimes, there's incompatibilities and things like that. Most important thing here is to pick the free tier if you have it, instead of production. Part of the way that AWS bills for RDS is through availability and uptime and things like that. So like if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it will tell you the estimated monthly cost. Since I put this in the free tier, it's free. But if I were to click on production here and scroll down, you're going to see $850 a month for
Wow.
production database. Now, luckily, it's not like they build that all at once, but yeah, it's not a fun mistake to make. So, so click on the free tier. The worst, if you don't have the free tier, if your account's too old, you can do dev and test and just do it for the purpose of the tutorial and delete it right away, and you won't incur much of a charge. But yeah. So so then we just need to kind of set up some of our database stuff. So I'm going to call this Colby database just so I don't confuse it with the other one.
I am all the resources.
You're going to be all the resources today to make it easy on me to remember everything. The one thing that's important here, we have to set a username and password. And I highly recommend, as you're just setting this up for a demo, to just make these really straightforward just for now. You can always go back and change them later, but the reason for this is that we're going to be putting the name and password, the username and password into the Ghost CLI. And so if you have a bunch of special characters, it will likely cause you some pain trying to like use that in a terminal. So I would recommend just doing something simple for the demo, for just kind of trying this stuff out. And then if you do want to use this in a real world situation, go back and, you know, change the password later, and then just, you can paste it right into the Ghost config or update it a different way. But I tried to use like my 1Password suggested passwords when I was first doing this, and just using all of the $signs and slashes and things like that was a real pain trying to do that in the terminal. All of this other stuff with the, you know, different classes and storage and all of that stuff, you don't need to worry about. It's all, you can just use all the defaults here. The one thing we do need to change though is we need to select yes here for public access, because if we don't have a public IP address, then our database won't be able to access, or our EC2 instance, which is going to run Ghost, won't be able to access our database. So I'm going to click yes for that. But otherwise, you're going to see that it's in the default VPC, and all of this is fine. So
and the nice thing, similar to before, if you're just using the default settings, you can kind of go through and it's already selected for you.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll keep going all that. And I think that's pretty much it. I didn't have anything else in my notes on that. It's always the thing that's tough about these AWS resources is like, you can't really make mistakes. Like if you get a setting wrong, you can't like change it after the fact. You just have to delete it and start over. And so, right. So if you run into a problem with the setup, then it's possible you picked something wrong with your server, your database, and you just have to go back and recreate it and do it again.
Yeah, AWS has definitely given me some anxiety, because, you know, it's great where they give you all the options in the world, but also if you don't know what you're doing, you have all the options in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's very easy to get yourself in a bind really quickly. I've done a lot of just deleting and starting over, like over and over again. But I guess that's the fun stuff. You do get one opportunity to view your credentials again for your database. I already have mine written down, so I'm not going to show them, but take advantage of that, because once you close this, then you'll never see those again. So if you need to write down your username and password that you created for the database, that's what it is. Okay, so while that spins up, we can get started on the SSHing into the server. So let's, there's a couple things we need to do. First, we're going to need the address for the EC2 instance. So if I go over to our list of instances, and click on our instance there. There's a nice little thing where you can kind of get a cheat sheet of how to do this. If you click on connect and choose this SSH client, it's going to give you the steps to actually get into this server. So you can actually just copy this whole thing and then paste it in a text document or something so that you know what to do.
The interesting thing, I don't know if you've ever used Lightsail, but Lightsail actually has an option where it will open up an SSH instance without even have to doing it locally. It's a little bit different of a use case, but I found that interesting.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so basically what you're doing is, so if we look at this address, you can see there's like a kind of an IP address embedded in here. And so if we were to go back to our server here, you can see this public DNS. That's the thing that we're going to SSH into. And you can see that those numbers match this public IP address. And if we were to open it now, there's nothing there. So nothing's happening there. But we can actually go in and we're going to set up a server and everything. So I go over to my terminal and I need to go to my dev folder. And let's just make sure that my ghost key is, ghost key. Should be in there somewhere.
Does your folder name have the rocket in it?
No.
Okay.
I just have it. Let's see, dev ghost. Yeah, it should be.
I was just gonna say I didn't know folders could have emojis in it.
No, I stole this from Kent Dodds, where he has like an emoji auto like generated. So every time I open a new terminal, it like, oh, you know what? I actually it used to do a randomly generated one, but when I was recording videos, I realized that having the randomly generated emoji was really annoying, because if I had to go back and edit, like do something over again, you could tell that the emoji had changed. And it really bothered me as somebody who is very like meticulous about editing and stuff like that. So I actually hard coded it to be the rocket.
That's amazing.
So, okay, so I should be able to paste this in, which is the SSH command, and hit yes. And you can see, let's make this a little bit bigger, but if I scroll up, you can see I get the welcome to Ubuntu message, which is pretty cool. This is like a genuine server that we just spun up out of nothing, and we're going to turn it into an actual web server.
It still blows my mind how like almost disposable servers are now, because you can easily spin one up like this.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So we need to do a couple things. We need to first we need to create a special user to be able to instead of using the root account directly to like install Ghost and all of that stuff, it's better to create a user, even if that user has elevated permissions. It's better to do that than use the root account. So what we're going to do is we're going to say sudo add user ghost admin, and that's going to create a new user, and we got to give it a password. So I'm just going to again make this like pretty simple. Okay, and then we don't really need any of these values. Since this is Ubuntu, it asks us a lot of like nice questions about the user. And then we're going to give that user elevated permissions to be a super user. So we're going to say sudo user mod and then -AG. And what this means is A stands for append and G stands for groups. So you're saying, give this person, add this person to this group. So I'm going to give I'm going to tell it to add to the sudo group the ghost admin user. And that's going to switch that user over. And then we're just going to switch over to the ghost admin account. So we can say SU, which stands for switch user, and then ghost admin. And then I got to put in my password. And now you can see, if you look carefully there, I should have changed my theme for this. This might be kind of hard to read, but you can see that I'm logged in as the ghost admin.
Nice.
Cool. So now we're going to install a couple of things. We need two things. We need a web server, and then we need what's called a reverse proxy. So what we're going to do is we're going to Ghost is going to run on Node, and so Node is going to run Ghost on a certain port. But what we want is that we want to map that port over to port 80, so that when traffic comes into the server, we need something, a traffic cop that can port over or route that traffic over to port 80. And so we're going to use something called Nginx for that. So we're going to install those things. In order to do that, though, we need to update all of the kind of server dependencies and everything. So we can use a tool called apt-get. So sudo apt-get update and sudo apt-get upgrade. So what this is doing is update is fetching all of the list of updates for the whole server. So Ubuntu has a bunch of patches and dependencies and things like that. And we need to get a list of all of those things that are out of date. And then we need to tell it to actually run all of those updates and install them. So that's what we're going to do first. So we're going to,
it's kind of like npm for like Linux, right?
Yeah,
along those
basically.
lines,
Yeah, basically you're just kind of going and updating everything. And if you kind of scroll through these things, you can see a lot of different like patches and security patches and things like that. And this is sort of one of the kind of downsides of running, managing your own servers. You have to make sure it's like up to date and stuff like that. Whereas if you were to just deploy something to Netlify.
Oh, I do that too.
I do that all the time. Sometimes I try to go to Netflix and end up typing in Netlify, and
I do that all the time.
Servers and my muscle memory in my hands is like, but yeah, if you were to deploy to something like Netlify or Vercel or something, they're running all of this behind the scenes for you, and you don't have to worry about it. So we're kind of taking the off-road approach of kind of doing it the old-fashioned way, but there's some pros and cons to that. So it's going to ask you if you want to do this. It's going to take a whopping 86 kilobytes of or 22.6 megabytes of space and free up 87 kilobytes. So we're going to say yes to that. Let that run. It usually doesn't take super long, luckily. Just takes like a minute or two. So we'll let that go.
If you want, you can tell us about your newsletter, developer microskills.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's so developer microskills is a newsletter I started because I kind of hate most career advice, and like self-help advice usually comes across as like kind of out of touch, or kind of just like, just work harder and believe in yourself and that kind of thing. And but I found that like a lot of those people, there's sort of these like gems buried underneath the delivery. And so a lot of the time, the people who most want or need that advice are really just like turned off by the delivery of it. It's sort of like, I always give the example of like compound interest, right? Like compound interest is a really powerful investing principle. And whether it's told to you by like a sleazy salesman with, slick backed hair and a Rolex, or whether it's told to you by your grandma, like it doesn't change the fundamental truth of compound interest being a real thing that actually matters, right? And so there's a lot of career stuff like that around like mentorship and feedback and how to transform, how to like grow as a person and that kind of thing. And so my goal is to try to like package that up in a way that is like takes into account context and, you know, people's lives and whatever they're working for, and not promising like millions of dollars or whatever else. So that's why I started it, and it's been going pretty well. It's over 1,200 people now.
That's awesome.
And I'm at the 30th issue. Just sent out the 30th issue. So yeah,
I
check
really
it out.
appreciate your thoughtful writing. It's been great. So
Oh, thanks.
that's awesome. And I posted the link in the comments.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me to try to write. I write about 1,200 words a week for it, and it's just meant to be like a way for me to write stuff down and like force myself to write like an article a week, basically. And it's been really great. It's gotten really good feedback, and I've really enjoyed it. So
it's awesome.
So yeah.
And just so you know, you have about a little under 30 minutes left.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we're golden. We're going to be just fine. So if we go back and look at our RDS, we should see that it is up and running now. Let's see. Colby database. Yeah, so you can see status is available. So nice. That's great. Okay, so if we go back to the terminal, you can see that all of that stuff is done. And we'll clear this out. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we need to get Nginx. So we're going to do sudo apt-get install Nginx. So really similar to npm, just like you said. That's going to pull that down, and we'll say yes to continue.
Just a funny anecdote. I shouldn't tell this about myself, but I used to think it was Nginx. But then when someone told me it was Nginx, I was just like mind blown.
Oh yeah, I feel like there are so many little Linux things like that, or like tools like that, where yeah, I've done the same thing. So Nginx is installed. We also need to configure it. Basically, we need to basically tell Ubuntu that it's okay to like let Nginx take over and do things. So there's a Linux tool called UFW, or uncomplicated firewall, and we can actually set it. It actually has an Nginx setting that's going to let us do this stuff. So we can say sudo UFW for uncomplicated firewall. I can actually drop a, see if it'll let me drop a link in the chat. See if it'll let me do that. If anybody wants to read more about that. And then single quote Nginx full, and it will just configure the firewall. Whoop.
That's awesome.
Type that in wrong. Sudo. Oh, I missed a. It's actually sudo UFW allow Nginx full. There we go.
That is very uncomplicated.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah. It's pretty neat. Okay, so now we've got Nginx, and we need Node. I prefer to use NVM, Node Version Manager. So if we go over to the browser and paste that in, we can scroll down to the install and update script. So all we need to do is copy one of these. You can use either curl or wget. I don't think it matters at all which one you use. They're pretty much the same. We're gonna copy that, go back to iTerm, and go ahead and paste that in. Basically what this is doing, you can see that there's a install.sh. So there's a script here that's going to run, and it's going to pipe that into our terminal. Now, word of warning here, this is a really dangerous thing to do if you don't trust the tool, because we're basically saying like, hey, run this script that lives on GitHub in my terminal here, and just like,
right,
just have at it. So I only do this with things that you trust. I mean, NVM has been around for a really long time. You can actually go look at the contents of the script. If you just like pull this address and go look at it, you can go look at it and see what it's doing. But it's installing and it adds some like some things to your.
And I'll also post a link to NVM.
Cool. Yeah. So as you might be aware, whenever you install something like this, you've got to like reload your terminal session. So what we can do is we can exit out of our we're in the Ghost admin user, so we can actually just exit out of that, and it'll take us back to the root, and we can log back into it to initiate NVM. So I'm going to say switch user dash Ghost admin. I can't remember what the dash is in that switch user command. It's a thing, and I can't remember what it is. And then I got to type my password. And no, authentication failure. Hold on. Ghost admin. There we go. Okay, so now if I type NVM, you can see I get all of the things, all of the help and everything. So what we can do is we can just install the latest node. I assume that Ghost is still going to work with the latest version. So we're going to say NVM install, and then you can do LTS, not lots, LTS for the long-term stable version. And that's currently 14.16.1.
Nice. I didn't know that there was that flag available. That's handy.
Yeah. NVM has a lot of really cool flags. If you do NVM ls, it will show you all of the different versions. Nice. So you can install them based on these versions. I've
literally really only used the use command and install. So this is
yeah, it's really awesome. It's really nice. Like if you have an old project that only works on a certain version of Node, you can just install, the latest version of that release, or you can install like the latest stable version. It's really, really handy.
That's awesome.
Cool. So now if I say node v, I've got 14.16.1, which is what we want. So now we get to the fun stuff, which is installing Ghost. So we're going to clear that out. And the nice thing is now Ghost has a CLI that makes everything 100 times easier. I used to use Ghost for my website back in like 2014 or 15 or 16 or somewhere in there. And you had to do all of this manually, and it was a really big pain to keep it updated and everything. So now it's really, really easy. So we can actually use our old friend NPM and do npm IG, so npm install globally, ghost-CLI, and that will.
So did npm come by default on the Ubuntu instance?
No, I think it's.
Or did I totally forget? Did you install?
Oh, we installed Node, and so Node will come with npm. Yeah,
I'm blanking. Never mind.
Yeah, no worries. So while that's loading, we do need one. We're gonna need one thing. Oh, well, I guess it's already done, but
that was quick.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. So we need to go get our connection string for our database. So I'm gonna go. I don't know why my let me just refresh this. I don't know why my scroll bar isn't showing. Okay, so if I click into our Colby database, there's an endpoint here that we're gonna need. So we're gonna copy this. And I would recommend making pulling up Notepad or something and composing this connection string yourself. Instead of trying to do it in the terminal, you can just kind of put this together in a note somewhere. So I'm gonna paste it in when we get to that point. But let me just compose it here, because it's a lot to type.
Yeah. especially trying to move the cursor around and trying to find the right paste point.
Yeah, it can be a pain. Okay. So we need to install Ghost, but in order to do that, we need to make a folder. So we're going to do sudo mkdir, which means make directory, and then we can give it a p flag, which basically means it'll create subdirectories if things don't exist. Like if I tell it to, so I'm going to say /var/www/ghost. So if for some reason the www folder doesn't exist, it'll just go ahead and create that for me. I think on Ubuntu
Nice.
it should already have it, but I don't know. So so we're going to make that folder. And if I were to list out /var, you can see a www there, and you can see /var/www. ls/var/www for listing it out. And you can see there's a Ghost folder in there. So now what we need to do is we need to change the owner of that folder. So we're going to do that with a command called chown. So sudo chown, and we're going to do the ghost admin. So that's the group and the user. Earlier we created a group that matched the name, and then /var/www/ghost, and that will change the owner of that whole directory over to the ghost admin user. And then we need
Nice thing about this is it also gives you a lot of command line practice, right?
Yeah, I mean that was like the kind of the cool thing about this project. Like on the surface, it sounds straightforward. Like, oh, I'm just it's because you're not even writing the app, you're just deploying it.
Yeah.
You're not actually doing any coding in this at all, really. But Ghost is like a full stack application that's ready for you, and so then you get practice doing like the server stuff, the database stuff, the command line. Like it lets you touch all of these different areas, and it's pretty nice. I mean, it's pretty fun to be able to like practice all of these things and walk through them. I learned a lot
Absolutely.
just by making this, like just having to like explain what all of these commands were and all of that stuff.
And even like me as a front-end engineer, like being able to kind of learn just how to like deploy these kind of things is really powerful, because you might not need to be working directly in like the Ghost backend or anything, but being able to deploy Ghost means you're less reliant on being able to do things yourself.
Yeah, and just speaking from experience over the years, like this kind of set of commands comes up all the time. Like this is
sure.
a like basically a dozen or so commands in Linux that come up for just about everything. Like you're always going to have to install some sort of server software. You're going to have to install some sort of reverse proxy. You're going to have to change permissions on things. You're going to have to update your software packages. And like I remember when I was first trying to learn this kind of thing, back when I was first getting started, I was trying to learn how to deploy Ember to a server, an Ubuntu server on DigitalOcean. And I was like pretty new to programming. I think I was only like maybe 6 months or a year in, and I like lost my mind. Like I didn't understand anything. I felt like I didn't understand. Like I felt like I was just breaking everything. And luckily, like there's a lot of good tutorials and stuff out there that can walk you through this kind of thing. But it's funny now to look back, and it's like basically the same process that I'm doing right now is what I was doing to try to learn how to deploy Ember. So it's a really good skill set to learn, even if you're spending most of your time on the front end.
For sure. And just a heads up, we have just over 15 minutes.
Perfect. It's going to actually, I bet you it's going to be like absolutely perfect timing. So we just need to now change the permissions for this folder. So we need to change it to where we can, this user and group ghost admin can read, write, and execute this folder. So we're going to do sudo chmod, so changing the permissions there. And this is kind of an interesting command that has two different ways you can write these permissions. One of them is using a base 8 number structure. So if I type 775, the first number is the read. It's user, group, and other. And there's different values for that. We could probably find like a tutorial on this, but you'll see this in a couple different ways. You could also do it in this sort of like user, read, write, group, read, write, execute, that kind of thing. I don't have that one memorized, but this one basically is saying for the user, give them read, write, and execute. For the group, read, write, and execute, and everybody else read and execute, basically is what that's saying. And so var www/ghost, and we're in. Okay, so now if we cd change directory over into var www ghost, and let's just clear that out. You can see if I list that out, there's nothing in there. So now we get to do the fun part, which is actually install Ghost. So we're going to, we're going to need one more thing. We're going to need the public IP address. So if I go back to Chrome, and let's go to our EC2 instance and copy the public IP address, because Ghost is going to walk us through this process. Okay, so I'm going to paste in this giant string here. It's going to be, the base command is ghost install. And then it's going to ask us, it's going to have us pass in a bunch of stuff. Now, the default for Ghost is to just self-host the database on the same server. So if you don't have a separate database, Ghost will install MySQL on the same server and spin it all up for you. The reason I didn't want to do that here is because that's obviously like a big possible point of failure. If you're, say you accidentally delete your EC2 instance, then you've lost your entire blog and all of your posts and all of your data and everything. So this kind of separates out the platform from the actual data by having a separate database.
And you probably get more like feature rich like opportunities with using AWS, right? Like as a service.
Yeah, you do, because like you can you can make the database as sophisticated as you want, or you can there are different like tools to be able to like log directly into the database and run queries and things like that that are just easier to do. And since it's on a separate server and a separate port and all of that stuff, it works with all those tools really well. So I pasted in the command, and you can see there's like, you give it the database type of MySQL, you give it the host, which is the connection string or the address of the database, and then you give in that username and password. And this is why earlier I was saying it's a lot easier to just use something straightforward right now, and then change it later to be more secure. And then you pass in the database name and just hit enter. And so Ghost does all of this stuff for you that you would have had to do yourself. Like it checks all of the node stuff and the space and the folder permissions and all of that stuff, and just does it all for you, which is really, really nice. So you can just kind of let that roll. And cool.
I should have timed this to see if this beats the old WordPress 5-minute install. Is that still their famous line?
Oh, I don't know.
They used to, at least they used to say like the 5-minute install for getting WordPress up and running.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like what's cool is that you can actually take an EC2 instance and turn it into a template. So you could actually create, after this point, you could just snapshot this and turn it into its own thing. Or you could you could have a, after installing Node and Nginx, you could turn that into a template so that then anytime you wanted to do this again, you could just spin that up and then just install Ghost and everything. So that's a really common thing people do with these like kind of dev environment kind of things.
Yeah. And I don't know if you just heard those sound effects. I realized that I had the sound effects muted before. So you have 10 minutes remaining. I don't know if you heard that little music jingle.
Oh, no, I didn't. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're just waiting on NPM basically because it's installing all of Ghost dependencies. But this is actually the last.
At least it's doing it all for us.
Yep. Okay. So this part's a little tricky. You need the public IP address, but you need to put in the HTTP. So HTTP and then paste in that public IP address. And of course, you can connect this to like a custom domain and everything like that. But we're just obviously not doing that now. So hit enter there. It's going to ask us if we want to set up Nginx. We're going to say yes. And it'll just kind of set all that up for us. It skipped SSLs because we're not using a custom domain. And then it's going to ask us if we want to set up something called systemd. Systemd is a process for controlling what programs run when a Linux system boots up. So we're going to say yes, because we want, anytime our server spins up, we want to automatically kick off Ghost so that it's always available. And then do you want to start Ghost? Yes, we do. And that's going to go.
That's going. I like the little icon.
I know. I like the little graphic there.
So are you using Ghost for your setup now?
No, I'm still using Gatsby for my site. Oh no. Invalid database host. Ghost install. That's weird. Right at the end, right at the buzzer.
Yeah. Do you need the HTTPS on there, or?
I don't think so. Let me pull up. Huh. That's weird. Let me go back and get the connection string.
We still have some time. We have 7 minutes.
That's weird. Let me go back to the. I wonder if I mistyped the username or something in the when I set up the database. That's always
the practical dev popped in and said that you can do it.
Thanks. Let's find. Oh, you know what? I missed a step. I skipped a step. I know what happened. I forgot to tell the database. I forgot to allow the database to talk to the server. So what we need to do is we need to edit the security group. I gotta remember where that we want.
This is why the networking stuff is important.
Yeah, this is why the networking stuff is important. There's a security groups. We want to I think we want to edit the inbound rules here and add in our Colby group. So we had basically by default, the database doesn't allow just anybody to access it. So we need to tell it to allow the group that has our server on it. So let's see if
which may seem like a pain, like if somebody's wondering why, but if you think about it, like it's the least amount of privilege by default. That way you're not really getting yourself into a bad situation.
Yeah, you don't really want just anybody to be able to log into your server or anything. So let's try that one more time. I hear the sound effect. Let's just try one more time to see if that did the trick. Oh, current directory is not empty. Oh, you know what? I probably don't have to actually install it again. I probably just have to do ghost start.
Because it probably knows all the same configurations.
Yeah, I think the install was fine. It was just when it tried to start up, it didn't have permissions to connect. Yeah, that did it.
Nice. Yay.
Yay. Right at the nick of time. Okay, so if I copy that over, paste that in. There you go. We got Ghost up and running. That's the public IP address, and we did it.
Beautiful.
Just
yay.
in time.
You didn't even get to hear the 0 minutes left exciting thing. Well, you probably will as we're talking through this, but nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like if somebody is kind of wondering about the IP, like as you kind of mentioned before, like you can totally set up your own custom domain with this, but for demonstration purposes.
Yeah, if we go back over to the terminal, there is a thing called well, you can actually do all of this with the CLI, so I don't recommend like just doing this yourself, but if you open up, there's something called ghost.production.json. Oh, no, it's not there. Oh no, now I gotta exit Vim. We'll be here all day. Okay, right. If I list this out. Oh, config.production.json. Go open that up. So this is where everything lives in like the Ghost configuration. So you can actually change things for anything with Ghost. And so you can set up like a custom domain and all of that. But luckily there's CLI commands now that let you do this much easier. So where, you know, if you change one thing, you don't break everything else.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's pretty straightforward to set it up. You just have to kind of do it in a specific order so that you don't lose access to the server. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, do you want to just take a quick second to kind of walk through and review everything that you did?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing we did, if I go back to EC2, the first thing we did was we spun up a server, an EC2 server, and that's where Ghost is going to live and run on Node. So we spun that up. Then we went over to RDS to do a separate relational database so that our data wasn't living on the same server as the Ghost installation. So we went over to the database and created our own new fancy database. And while that was spinning up, we got started on actually installing everything on the server. So we went over to our server. Let's quit that. And basically first created a new user and group that could own all of this stuff. And then we installed Node and Nginx to be able to handle all of the server stuff. And then just installed Ghost using the CLI. And in order to do that, we needed to get our information for our database, which is this endpoint right here. And we also forgot to do one thing, which was update our security setting, our inbound rules for the security group, so that we could let our server talk to our database. So that was one thing that we missed. Actually, looking at this now, I think I do this a slightly different way in the course that only allows it on the specific port. So definitely go watch the video for that, because I feel like I'm missing something there with that, because we should see like only the port allowed, which is like 3307 or whatever it is. But yeah, and so then we installed Ghost, and instead of having this, we have our Ghost set up. We can actually like walk through this wizard and set up our
So
own blog
that's
if we wanted to. We'd be like,
so
what
that's
will
the
we do?
success, and it was kind of perfect with the at the end of the review.
Yeah, seriously. And yeah, so you can walk through that and you'll have your own
Awesome.
ghost set up.
Awesome. Well,
Cool.
congratulations on beating Colbyashi Maru and facing off.
Yeah, that's really funny that the timing was like perfect. We did the whole thing in an hour.
Yeah, that worked out really well. Yeah, I honestly didn't expect, because I know like sometimes I do AWS services take a little bit. I didn't expect to because we were talking about the whole like TV baking show where somebody already has it in the oven, right? So
yeah,
but
no,
it
seriously,
ended up working out really well.
I really thought that I might have to just like show the finished product because there's so many variables that can go wrong in AWS.
For sure. But nice job, nice job. But
Yeah,
thank you everybody for joining. I'd also like to thank Sam for accepting the challenge to face off on Colbyashi and Maru. Let me move to the discussion. Well, it's a little messed up, but I think it's okay. Or just changing the
Oh yeah, because I stopped sharing.
yeah.
I didn't give you a heads up.
It's okay. I think my screen doesn't even want to work, so it's a little wonky, but it's okay. But yeah, everybody make sure to go check out Sam's course at egghead.io. I'm going to share that in the comments right now, and I also have a ton of other links of his work, including his newsletter. And I don't know if you want to give a quick second about it. It looks like it pasted in with Markdown, but I think people can still click on it, where you have some articles on AWS. Do you want to walk through those links real quick?
Yeah, I'll just so one of the one I wanted to point out, I'll just paste it again to make it easier, is I have an article that's like a compilation of a bunch of resources to get started learning AWS as a developer. It's just basically my own notes as I've been working through this process. We already talked about the newsletter. You've got a link to my book, Getting Started in DevRel, and also Guide to Tiny Experiments. And I think that's basically everything. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming on. I was trying to see if I could fix it, but I didn't make it any better. Anyways, yeah. So next week we'll have Tadas Petra. We'll be facing off against building an authenticated notes app with Flutter. So Sam, before we end, any last words?
No, thanks everybody. I hope everybody has a great rest of their week.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and raid Alex Trost because it looks like he is going on. But otherwise, thanks everybody. And this is Colby signing off.